What does it take to actually possibly even transfer like one company to the next one, or, to expand in a different country? My superpower is I co-founded a couple of companies, and we really went from nothing to a couple of hundred people on the team and a couple of $100 million in sales. So I think a superpower is probably that I understand scale and I understand the elements you need to have in place to scale. Fundraising sounds sexy. Sales sounds sexy too. If I choose between the two, I would always take the sales. Fundraising many times is a false indicator, right? So you're really good at fundraising. That's awesome. But that still doesn't mean that you founded a campaign and you're really good at monetizing your idea.
Hi, today I have the pleasure of speaking with Christian Magel. Christian started his entrepreneurial journey in Europe, but then moved to Australia and now lives in the United States. He was Chief Marketing Officer of Amasem, which grew to over $100 million in sales in 5 years and eventually over $400 million. He currently runs Venture Lane in Boston, helping early-stage B2B tech startups. On top of that, he is a personal friend of mine, and I had the pleasure of helping him launch Venture Lane Studio, which helps B2B startups figure out how to get traction. Thanks for joining, Christian.
Well, always a pleasure to be here with you. What a great way to open this year. Love it.
Yeah. So, Christian, you and I have known each other a while now. I helped you with launching of Venture Lane Studio, and we've worked together, but one of the things that always, I think, attracted me to working with you and to getting to know you was, both of us have a shared background in international entrepreneurship. So yeah. I'd like to jump right in, if that's okay, and ask you kind of how you started your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think my background is I'm a go-to-market guy. Yeah, when I came out of university, that was in 1995. It was the start of the internet era, and that kind of really collided. Since 1996, I've been on internet projects and anything that had to do with internet, and I took a route down the marketing, go-to-market, traction route, and that combination followed me on. So I worked in e-commerce, I worked in media, I worked in telecommunication. I started as a little junior product manager, became an executive, became a co-founder, became a founder. I always had that dream to understand how to build a business from scratch. And now, many years and decades later, I'm close to understand it.
Well, you dated yourself when you said what year you graduated. So, when you said you always had the vision or view of being a founder, being an entrepreneur, when did that start for you? And especially for the younger listeners, when did that start? And how did you jump in? Like you were product manager, but how'd you really jump in?
Yeah. The funny thing is, like, if you ask me, like now in hindsight, there are plenty of signs that would have been the right career for me. But what was really there was like an opportunity. All of a sudden, you could be an entrepreneur in the time of startups, right? So, I had my first executive positions as a 28-year-old, having a team and spending millions of dollars in marketing, and nobody would care. That would have not happened 10 years before in a regular industry. So in a way, what collided is like a certain timeline and my career and my interest. And I think I always wanted to work in a fast-paced environment, ideally with not too much red tape, and with getting responsibility really fast. And I got that, and the development of internet and startups and everything that happened from the mid 90s till the end of 90s helped tremendously to kind of make this huge leap. So I became a European marketing director at Let's Buy It, actually marketing director for 3 countries, and the European marketing director in the 2000s. And this is where I met my then to become co-founders, and I really understood how this industry was working. So then I understood that is possible. I think today the time's a little bit different. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you can probably be an entrepreneur out of college or in college even. Back at the time, I did a little bit the normal path, and then I saw this world, and there was just no going back.
Do you feel that the experience? This is something that I'm going to ask you in a bit about advice, but do you feel that first couple of years of working for somebody and getting that kind of structure was that useful in your journey, or if you were to do it today, would you go straight in and jump into the entrepreneurship?
Well, there's maybe 2 angles, right? So one is I admire young students that are in their early 20s. They are still in college and starting their business. I really admire this because there's like literally 100 things that you need to figure out that you have no clue. You're wearing 15 hats. 3 of them you feel comfortable with, and the other 12 are you feel pretty uncomfortable with. I think it's never too early for an entrepreneurial endeavor to do a real startup with millions of dollars of funding and building a team and all of that stuff. That I find team or people that either worked in the industry for a while in other startups kind of got to know the game. Or people that kind of go from, oh, I did this student thing and then I did this thing and then I really launched with something real, do themselves a little bit of a better favor. So that's one side of it. The other side of it, I recruited myself people straight out of school, or saw companies recruiting people straight out of school for startups. It's a harsh environment. You need to deliver value the first day. There's no apprenticeship. There's no, hey, let's wait 2 years until you understand. So my gut feel would be, if you want to be in startup land, either get an experienced co-founder or do a couple of years of startup world. And if that is still enticing to you, then launch your next thing. You will probably get there with a little less risk than starting this out right out of university.
Great. You're international. You started in Germany. You built the team up in Europe, and then you jumped over to Australia.
Yeah.
Walk me through that, and now you're in the States. So 3 continents. Walk me through how that helped you to where you are today, but also the experience of being on multi-continents.
It's a little bit of a crazy story. So I joined a startup that did an IPO'd mid 2000s. Unfortunately, 3 or 4 months too late. Like it was like after the peak, everything came down. But the great thing, I met my co-founders there, and a couple of years later, we had a great idea in the telecommunications sector and started a company which went relatively quickly to roll out the brand to a company called Simyo, and became the largest online-based MVNO, mobile virtual network operator. Think of a Virgin Mobile, just based on the internet. We were the e-commerce guys that launched that company together with a partner, and then it was like an amazing success. So we crushed it in Germany, then helped roll this out in all of our overall 5 countries, and got it to about $300 million in revenue in about 5 years. So, and that with a relatively small team. Now, the downside of that was we did this with a partner. So the outcome of this was great, was significant, but probably not enough to retire on it. So we as a team really worked well. We had we were four co-founders, very unusual usually, and we said what are we gonna do? And in the end, bumped into our then to become next co-founder, Pete from Australia, who said well, why don't you guys do this in Australia if you've been so successful here? And we thought wow, that's crazy. Why would we? But still, we jumped on a plane.
So 5 co-founders in the next company.
So we had 5 co-founders in the next company, jumped on a plane, figured out, hey, this is a great country to do a business. Usually Australia is a little bit further behind the development. And then also a great, by that time we all had families and kids. Also a great place to live, as you know. Since your wife is from Australia, you've been many times, right? So negotiated the contracts and started a company there from scratch, which was in this area and became the largest independent mobile operator in Australia. And we started.
And how long did that take you? So just let's take a step back. The company was Amasim, right? Amasim?
Yeah, Amasim, and we started this in 2010. We IPO'd in 2015. That with about, I think, 135 million Aussie dollars. So that's about $100 million in revenue. And then that became about 2-3 years later, that became like a $300 million, actually 400 million American dollars revenue business. Now we decided to IPO in 2015. So it was relatively quick, like the go through from 0 to $100 million in 5 years. That's relatively quick, and have an exit within 5 years. That's also relatively quick. It is something that you can do in B2C most if anywhere. B2B is a little rougher, but but we decided we did not want to be on the ride for the next 3 years to be in a public company. At that point we've been together as a team for 16 years. And it felt like a good time for a break. 2 of us went back to Germany. 2 initially stayed on in Australia, and myself and my family, we decided we wanted to come to the US. So you see, like all these things were relatively quickly, but I have to say, what really helped there was we knew what we were doing. So product or founder market fit was perfect for us. We just did the same thing, not the exact same thing, and a better version of it just a couple of years later, and with a great success again.
You know, I've heard you. I know you say this a lot, and somebody else listening may not know what you mean by that. And so, can you describe what you mean by founder market fit?
Oh, founder market fit. There's no definition really for that. But when we are looking in companies for venture and studio, we're looking for founder market fit. And the founder market fit usually says somebody knows the industry, so has been in the industry before, possibly knows already a couple of customers that they might have had in another company, and they just need to call them up and say, hey, I got a new product here, and I know already your pain, your acute pain. So all of this helps to make things faster. You don't need to just you still need to figure out a ton of stuff, but the basic understanding of market dynamics, market size, pain, acute pain, all that should already be there just because you had the experience over a couple of years working in that industry. So huge advantage, and it's practically a car half built already. You just need to finish the engine or finish the car assembly.
Now that makes it sound like it was an instant success, and I know from hearing you tell the story, you went out and raised, because of your background, you were able to raise a lot of money very quickly.
Yeah,
as I recall, like it was what 20.
We raised initially 35 million Aussie. That would have been about 27 million US. Yeah.
But it didn't go. But it didn't instantly. You didn't have an instant success. Walk me through that.
Well, to your point, like, first of all, yes, that looks like 10 years, 2 companies done. Listen, lots of learnings, lots of mistakes, lots of aha moments, lots of nights over, lost sleep and all of that. So, but maybe you were referring to one thing. We started in Australia. We came in with the idea of launching a product that we thought would be the right thing for Australia, only to find out later on that was actually the wrong assumption. We thought of like a unit priced mobile plan, and the whole country was on monthly based mobile plans as we know it today. But we went in like we had, we wanted to be about fairness and all of that stuff. It resonated, but it did not resonate enough. And all above our ARPU, which would be translated, the contract size per customer did not work out. And it would have not made sense to build a business on that with the expenses that we had. So, we saw actually, I have to give credit to Rolf, our CEO, who back at this like, guys, we can't do this. And I put up my hands like, we got to make this happen. I was responsible for the marketing and the traction side. And I think we would have ultimately possibly made it, but like by that time, we probably would have run out of money. So we needed to really stop it and really tweak our product. So we went from a product that would make us $15 a month to a product that would make us $40 a month. And we introduced one of the first unlimited plans in Australia. And it took us, so we had a board meeting. The board back at the time said, guys, one part of the board, not all of the board, one said, listen, we want you to stop this. Why don't you shut it all down and redistribute the money? Some others were a little bit more supportive. And we knew that there's a new plan coming. And we said, listen, guys, trust us. We got this. We know that this is the way out. First learning here is to have a way out and not just say there's a way out, but already have the plans to do so and having it pre-negotiated. And now we just needed to execute and needed the time. Actually, we did another fundraise during that time. I think another $5 million or something like that to get a little bit of extra runway. And then we got that product out that really resonated. It was like a really standout, never seen before, super attractive in pricing. And that gave us the extra revenue that made us grow. And we had literally 2 fundraisers altogether, and that we made it with that, although all the investors said, hey, you probably got to raise a little bit more money. But it took us to sit together, be resilient, insist that we have a solution, work really hard to make it happen, and convince the board that we are worth their trust. And, I think it probably helped that we did a business like that before, but that was the big turnaround. And from there on, like we just went through the roof with the numbers and the revenue.
So I want to go on one more question on Mason, and then I would go on. But I remember at one point you said that you looked at taking that model and bringing it to the States. You had researched it. And how did that research work out? And ultimately, why did you decide not to?
Well, we decided to actually do it. The idea was, Australia obviously is a small country. We had a working model that we thought would be perfect for the US. Actually, I looked at the US before we looked at Australia, and we decided not to pursue it. But we had a working model. At that point, we had close to $100 million in revenue. So we were just about to hit cash flow break even, and there was no real solution in the US. So the first thing we needed is actually somebody who would give us their network. So we negotiated a deal with T-Mobile, and they were really supportive. But then we needed, the US is a large market, so we needed a couple $10 million of funding like right away. And that was tough. So what we said is like, okay, we're gonna self-fund the first couple of months to get the business set up, and then we use that time to set up the business and to fundraise in parallel, which a lot of companies don't do, but we did at the time. So I actually moved for that time with my co-founder over there. We set up the operation, and we got everything set, the technical parts, marketing parts, team parts, and so on, as if we were 6 weeks before launch. And then that's where we usually need to do like media bookings and, commit millions of dollars. And in the meantime, my other 2 co-founders actually went out to go fundraising, or other 3 actually. And that, really was really tough. So we spent 10 months in Australia, really looked for that big check that was really hard to get. And one of the reasons that we found out later is that the MVNO business model raised about $1 billion in the US before, and practically everything was a write-off. Nobody did it the right way. I think we could have had the right way, and I don't know if you know Ryan Reynolds that did Mint. They sold their company for $1 billion. So that was like 3 years after we wanted to actually launch. So I think we would have had a good chance to create $1 billion revenue business there. But it was just too hard to get a couple $10 million fundraised. And then we needed to kind of abort and say, we're not doing it. We're going back to Australia. And then that was where we put a focus on doing the IPO in Australia. And, it was a great outcome. But in the end, we lost a little bit the opportunity to build a business that turns over $1 billion. So,
you always have.
I
can always say that.
It would have been very stressful, a very stressful time in my life or in our lives. But it just turned out the way it turned out.
I just want to shift a bit. Your background was mainly as chief marketing officer in B2C, and now you help companies, and I've seen it firsthand, helping B2B companies. I have my own view on it. I'm happy to share it, but tell me what you feel is your kind of strength there, and how that works, and where the differences are and the similarities and how you apply it.
Hey, maybe we do it this way. Like, let me chime in, and I want to hear your opinion. My own self-reflection with this would be probably, there are, well, number one, the top of funnel is in sales is very much a marketing exercise, right? So where B2B is different than you take, rather than a product-led growth approach where you just like drive people through a website or let them sign up. You then go through the sales funnel and really have these discussions that are personal. And there's a whole art, as you know, and that you master in a great way. And I learned so much from you in that respect. But I think about the top of funnel, personas, messaging, all of that, and the number drivenness, and like really, don't believe your own bullshit, like follow the process and see what really comes through it. I learned that. But then I also learned that how different it is to do the B2B side. And what I loved about it is, I mean, a part of this I did already because we negotiated partner deals and, service providers, but also we had the largest retail launch in Australia ever, with I think 12,000 point of sales. So we negotiated these deals with retailers, and that felt like there was like a lot of like schmoozing and doing all of that. Yep. But hey, was I the expert on B2B? Absolutely not. I learned this a lot through the work that we did together, and the work we did with a lot of B2B startups that, as you know, are usually the kind of companies that you find here in Boston. But happy to hear what you have to say.
No, I think it's a couple of things. One is I think being sometimes not always being in it, seeing it from the outside. That's one, and the other is you're very curious. Right. So I think you do absorb. So anything that we were working on together, you absorb that very quickly. But more importantly, I think the value that you bring, your ability to help companies with the management side of things and helping them focus. And I don't think companies always value that early on as much as they should. And it's where they often get tripped up. But I mean, you're probably the best person I've seen at getting them to be structured in their thinking and the way they go about things in their regular planning and their cadences, and keeping them on track. And I've seen more companies turn around because of that than the sales stuff, to be honest. So
yeah. And very kind for you to say. I mean, obviously, you can have all operating system if you're not delivering traction in sales. I mean, you and I were completely aligned on this. If you want to see what's the critical success factor for startup success, it's not only the team, is not the product. It is actually traction, because the traction already gives us some indication. Is that team able to deliver this? Is the product able to deliver this? Now, that doesn't mean that there's nothing there, but the traction is the real proof that whatever the combination is actually works out. And I agree with you. Fundraising sounds sexy. Sales sounds sexy too. If I choose between the two, I would always take the sales. And then
you don't have any money.
and then the operate, and in a way, fundraising many times is a false indicator, right? So you're really good at fundraising. That's awesome, but that still doesn't mean that you founded a campaign and you're really good at monetizing your idea. But coming back to your operating system, I think where an operating system works really well for startups is you have scarce resources as a startup, and that is your limiting factor at any corner that you go to. Now, to make every day like probably 50 decisions on how to use your time, what to say yes to and what to say no to, and what to be focused on, and to put this into an operating system, and we've done this many times with dozens and close to 100 companies, introducing like OKRs and really an operating system of meetings and the cadences and having that and having introducing accountability and focus into the company. That is something that if you do not have that, you will need it at some point, but the earlier you have it, the better service it does to you, because it holds people accountable. And you don't need to just believe your own bullshit. You can actually believe real figures and to say yes or no and make decisions based on data and based on evidence rather than based on gut feel.
Let's talk about venture lane a bit and just your own personal investing in startups. I know you've done a lot of that yourself. What do you look for?
So far, I invested in 40 plus companies, and the learning here is probably the usual formula is like founder with market and a good product and some pain here. I want to go a little deeper. I think number one, it starts all with the hopefully co-founder team, right? So. I think people have different opinions on co-founders or not co-founders, but I think it starts with a founder or co-founder team. Just very easy. If you want to go on holiday and you're a single founder, who's there? If you get hit by a bus, what's there as a company if you don't have a co-founder? Hopefully by that time you have a great team that supports you. But a co-founder just helps to have that second person and have that second opinion and, balance yourself out. So a really great co-founder team with ideally a good founder market fit. And for me, the founder market fit means they know the startup world, they know the industry, they know the pain. And through that, they just picked up the phone most likely and asked somebody, hey, do you want to be my design partner to build the product around, right? So, and they would have known what's really missing in the industry. Then what's really you want a founder that is good in sales. Now that's not actually just for sales, is because there's two crucial parts in a startup. One is you need to most likely fundraise, and the other one, you need to gain traction. Actually, you need to get traction ideally first, and then you do the fundraise. But both need a talent for sales. If you do not have a talent in sales in your co-founder team, then this is really hard, because it is expected that you're fundraising and that you're having traction, and traction will help you with fundraising, and the other way around. So I felt that this is probably a good indicator. A really acute problem, and Brian, you're probably the best person to explain what an acute problem is, but something that is really the chair throwing problem and not just like a nice to have. So I'm taking your own words. So something that people really love and really need, and then it adds ideally to the top line. So is revenue has some kind of impact on revenue. I mean, it's just the narrative that you tell. Just efficiency is good, but many times not enough. So have a product that actually solve that, and is really, in our case, they have already an MVP. There's a product out there and it delivers value. And then a large enough market and an attractive enough beachhead. So people kind of mix this up a little bit. Sometimes the beachhead is the whole market. No, you want a small enough market where you can test something out, and then you need to tell the story of where the company can go. And then, as you know, traction. So whatever is there already, all that can be summarized. If you have traction, most likely all the above points are already there. Because you show that the machine is working with each other, and the different wheels in the engine just working their magic and propelling you to a whole different state than if these things are not working together with.
I think you and I have had this conversation many times. The only area that I know that investors agree with you on the co-founder issue. And I personally,
I know you have a little bit of a different opinion.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Which is cool.
I think teams can make up for that over time. And I think the first 2 years are really hard no matter what. So, you and I, we've seen fantastic solo founders, but to be true, if you look at 100 successful startups, it might be five of them might be solo founders all the way through. And the rest might be, different. I acknowledge the data supports your point. Yeah, and as you know, Sean always tells me to point to the data, but I like to look beyond the data sometimes. Yeah, that's right. Just me. So you've now you came to the U.S. was for personal reasons. How do you find the business environment? So you've been in Europe. You're setting up businesses across Europe, setting up business in Australia. I know you spent a bit of time in Asia, as a buyer of services, and now you're in the U.S. What do you see as the difference?
So let's make this practical from a startup experience. What do you take away from that, and what does it take to actually possibly even transfer like one company to the next one, or to expand in a different country? Well, number one is the one takeaway is we always use the analogy of a chocolate cake recipe, right? So although there is in your mind only one chocolate cake, every culture actually has a chocolate cake, but they're all done differently because they all have like a slightly different mix and recipe. Different heat, different humidity, whatever, different flour. So the way we always describe this, like you can have a chocolate cake recipe that is successful in one country. That's about 60%. And then the other 40% is probably local flavors. And you need to adapt to competitive environment and all of that stuff. So if you look into, as from a startup perspective, the US there's nothing like that in the whole world. You make it into the US, I'm not sure if you then can make it anywhere, but it definitely helps. It is by far the largest market with the biggest opportunity, be it in capital, be it in terms of customers, be it in exit scenarios for any kind of founder. So I've seen, I grew up in Germany. I've seen many startups. Some of them come here to the US, but it's usually hard. But many of them actually go into different countries in Europe. The EU has 27 countries. That is, and I worked at Let's Buy It in a company that we had, I think, 12 different countries or something like that. Like it is a local operation. There's different languages. There's different tax rules. Now there's some things that are all equal in the EU, but that is all taking away from the possibility to scale. The US as one country, although I would not look at it as necessarily economically one country, has the possibility. You do your Delaware C Corp, and then you can focus on different regions and take on the whole of the US as a country. And of course, you need to deal with different tax rules and all that stuff, but it is a relatively homogeneous market. And from East Coast to West Coast, capital provided, exit scenarios, all of that is really awesome. Now, if you look into sales, for example, sales are done very differently in Europe, for example. It's very much a relationship sale. So you know somebody who knows somebody and so on. And that's the one thing. And the other thing is, in the US, you're very deep into a vertical, versus here in Europe, many times there's only 30 really large enterprise customers in one country. So you need to provide a service that is good for a bank and a telecommunication company and an insurance company. Whereas here you would just focus on insurance and build it out, and it's big enough, right? So there are really great scale advantages in all kinds of areas, including the entrepreneurial mindset in the United States, where a failure is not necessarily looked at or frowned upon. It is literally a little chip that on your progress to things, will hopefully help you come to a real success. So lots of differences, I find. Still a great pleasure to have started businesses on 3 continents. And I think by now I would started business in 10 countries or so. And there's a great cultural experience that comes with that I sometimes miss a little bit in the United States. But in terms of exit and outcome and startup outcome, I would say the US is leading by far.
So I have 2 more questions for you. One is, what's your superpower?
My superpower is I co-founded a couple of companies, and we really went from nothing to a couple of hundred people on a team and a couple of $100 million in sales. So I think a superpower is probably that I understand scale, and I understand the elements you need to have in place to scale. And as you know, the startup game is very much about put your things in place today so that you can be successful tomorrow. And sometimes if you do this for the first time or second time, you might not really think it through. And that in combination with not thinking it through too much, I think, and being really still pragmatic and if needed, turn on a point or pivot on a point because you see this is the way it's going to find these elements of momentum and build companies from scale up and seeing it through early on and making decisions on the way relatively quickly and with no denial. That's, I guess, that became a superpower that was hard earned, I have to say. I did not start out with that.
Okay. If you were 30 years old or late 20s and you think you want to be an entrepreneur, what advice would you give somebody? Besides come hang out at Adventure Lane, which I definitely would recommend. Okay. Separate from that advice.
Come by to Adventure Lane and hang out with the 2 of us. Yeah, sure. I would say, well, first of all, I do not regret to be an entrepreneur. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I feel once you're took that route down, like not doing the corporate bit, you can't go back anymore because it's agony to go through the red tape of a big company. So I've never regretted it ever. A piece of advice is and maybe that is something, if I take a step back, like all the dozens and hundreds of companies that we've seen and worked with, is the secret formula most of the time is, besides what you see in results and traction, is usually the result of focus, right? So focus, and find out what to say yes and what to say no to really early on. Always think that you're in the game of scarce resources, and how do I get to the farthest point that I can get to in the shortest amount of time with the least resources to then hit the next milestone to either get some funding or get some revenue in that help me further. So focus is your friend, whatever you do. And there's one thing that one of my mentors or one of our mentors kind of gave us on the way. He was a famous rugby coach, and he said, focus on play your best game. If you play your best game and you do day after day the best you can, that is the best you can. Do not watch the scoreboard all the time. Meaning is like, if you're always looking at like, okay, I have that money or I need to do a sale this month because if not, it is that can get into your head. If you do the right things and find somebody who helps you along with it, find a Sherpa, a mentor, or somebody like Venture Lane to help you along with that, and you play your best game, you will see the result. Sometimes earlier, sometimes later. But people forget that, and they stare at the scoreboard, and they can't get their mind off like, oh my God, I didn't meet my goals. But they maybe just a month or 2 months out of just playing the game and be focused and do the same thing over and over again, tweak it, tune it, be resilient.
There's a coach that wrote a book about that. It's on my shelf. I haven't read it yet. It's all about that along those lines.
Yeah, and you would probably agree, having seen many startups doing 10,000 things at the same time.
My advice would be to, if they're in Boston, is to come see you. If you can get Christian on your cap table, or as an advisor, or even just to hang out at the Venture Lane space. I can't imagine. I wish I would have had that. I wish I would have had the kind of resources that you provide.
Well, that's what we're trying to do, is like, have something that we wished to have to do. And, we're 50 B2B startups here. We have, there's actually 5 accelerators working out of our Venture Lane, and we are the startup hub here, the leading startup hub for Boston, which is the 5th largest ecosystem in the world. So there are worse places to start and continue with a successful startup.
Well, Christian, thank you for joining and coming on, and it's a pleasure always, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me on, and always, how much I enjoyed actually working with you.